Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion panel this afternoon. My name's Tanya Beckett. I'm a BBC broadcaster, and I'm going to be hosting this panel on responsible tourism. Now, I've been doing this for a few years, but what we're seeing, what's changing, particularly in the last couple of years, and I'm noticing it in terms of surveys this year, is just how much the consumer is pushing this agenda. We've got surveys by Booking.com, represented here, Expedia, Euromonitor, IBM, Boston Consulting Group, all revealing a very rapidly changing market in this regard. So what we want to unpack really in the next 30, 45 minutes is to what extent businesses are responding and to what extent they are leading and what more can they do in this space. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to introduce our lovely panelists next. To my immediate right, I have Danielle De Silva, who's Head of Sustainability at Booking.com. Welcome to her. I've got Matt Callaghan next to her, who is Director of Customer and Operations at EasyJet Holidays, so here in the UK. I've got Arvind Singh right at the end there, Minister of Tourism for India. You may be aware that India has been extremely successful in this regard and has won many responsible tourism awards, and particularly in 2021 was very successful. Ava Stewart, who is Global Sector Head of Travel and Tourism at YouGov. Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us. And Chris Warren, who's CEO at My Green Butler. And I'm going to get him to talk a little bit about the business there. So let's talk about consumer demand changing and how the consumer might be demanding more in terms of sustainable credentials. And Danielle, if I can just start with you, because I've said that Booking.com have looked into this and researched it. What did you find?
Well, we found for the last several years that sustainable travel is important to consumers, but we found that it is growing, and it is growing consistently across all markets, and customers want to travel sustainably. So we found consistently that 81% of our travelers find sustainable travel important, and we found that 71% of our travelers actually want to travel sustainably in the coming 12 months, which is a 10% increase on last year. And more importantly, we find that they're actually looking for this information. So over a third of our travelers are actually actively looking for this information when they're searching for accommodations, also when they're searching for transport. But fundamentally, there is a barrier for them. They don't know how to find it. They don't really know what sustainable travel means. And those are all things that we need to address for our travelers to actually make it easier for them to make the choices that they're trying to make and they're telling us that they want to make.
Now, when you say sustainable travel, what do you mean by that? Give me some examples if you
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I think if you ask the audience, a lot of people, when they think of sustainable travel, they think no flying and they think hanging up a towel. It is fundamentally more than that. So we're looking at social, economic, and environmental sustainability. We're looking at the crowdedness of a destination. We're looking at cultural preservation or mitigating cultural degradation. And then, of course, we're looking at resource use, reducing carbon emissions, but also reducing water consumption, promoting biodiversity, protecting natural resources. This is what we mean, and fundamentally enhancing the positive impact that travel can bring while mitigating that negative impact. That's what we think of sustainable travel as.
Okay, let me come to Ava now from YouGov and ask what your perception of responsible or sustainable, more particularly, travel is.
Sure. Well, actually, when we try to assess what consumers think and feel about different brands and what are they doing and how they're responding to what destinations are trying to achieve in sort of creating a bigger space for sustainable travel, it's very difficult to measure this consistently and accurately because organizations are at different stages on that path, and also they take different measures and different strategies, and even communication varies greatly from one organization to another. So to address these challenges, we decided to look at what the responsible traveler thinks and feels about these brands. We ask consumers to identify themselves, what type of traveler they are, and those who see themselves, first and foremost, caring about the environment, culturally minded, focused on health and wellness, and really keen to make a difference when they travel. So those travelers, they notice all of the experiences that are brought to them by companies that specifically focus in this space, but also they consider destinations in a broader sense, not just those who target responsible travelers, but particularly looking at which destinations appeal the most to them. And then we measure, for instance, where responsible travelers wish to go, and then we look at the general population. And what we've seen in North America, all across European markets, Italy emerged as #1 destination for responsible travelers. We were quite surprised about it. And then that followed with France. And that's really important because it's, sustainability is part of everything, the way that people see travel as a whole. It's about inspiration to go somewhere. It's about the attractiveness of destination. So sustainability needs to weave into the whole image of a country. And so when we look at the responsible travelers compared to general population, we see a much greater appreciation for sustainable efforts amongst those people. So Germany had to refocus their efforts on who they target during the pandemic because they were so focused on business traveler before, and they had to move, they had to pivot to target responsible travelers through offering them heritage solutions, experiencing culture, experiencing food. And amongst responsible travelers, there's been such a great shift in the way that they were perceiving Germany. Across APAC markets, familiarity plays a great role. So we see that Japan, South Korea emerge as top destinations for responsible travelers. And then in India, we see that local consumers appreciate all the sustainable efforts so much, so they really want to go to various different spots in the country that promote that ease of life, that comfort, that wellness, and of course, the giving back to communities side of things. And then, sorry, just last thing to mention I forgot, which of course is very, very important. And this is, I promise you, this is not because Danielle sits next to me, and it's not because she coerced me, bribed me, or threatened me behind stage to say this, but Booking.com does come very, it's a highly considered organization amongst the responsible travelers around the world. It usually comes in the top 3 in various different source markets, along with Airbnb, along with some of the other OTAs. So I feel that OTAs have done a great job in getting in front of a consumer with the offers that are easy to find online, and I think we need to do a little bit more of that as well for consumers to be able to find those offers a lot easier or find information a lot easier, so that really starts affecting how we book.
Okay, so we've understood that there is a very strong demand there, and the question then becomes, how does one address this? Let's, if we can, go to Chris from My Green Butler. Chris, just explain what you do at My Green Butler, what My Green Butler is, and how it might fit into this story.
So My Green Butler is a software system that records the consumption of a tourist accommodation property in real time and reports that back to the management, the staff and the guests, and we compare it against target saving figures, the actual consumption that people are having, and the best performers in that accommodation in that season. So we've developed this over a number of years. I've worked with over 16,000 guests since 2006 to really assess how they're changing, why they're changing, and how our software can improve their participation in the sustainability journey.
And are you finding that the appetite for that type of measuring and monitoring is increasing because businesses are becoming much more conscious?
I'll give you 2 ways of answering that. So from a qualitative point of view, people were originally in 2006, they had set beliefs, set views on what their accommodation should be providing them. But then over a number of years, things in society have changed. Schools are offering vegetable gardens to parents. They're getting more involved. People's beliefs, like Lego bricks, are beginning to scatter. And then over the recent past, with extreme weather events, they've reformed into new beliefs, realizing that they should take more sustainability seriously, but more sustainable lifestyles more seriously. The conflict for them is that while they have a recycling bin at home or many, when they stay in accommodation, there's one bin. When they're asked to renew their towels, there's not enough places to dry them out during the day. From a numbers point of view, I've seen guests are now saving between 15 to 38% of their resources by getting this feedback, and they're motivated because they can see the difference that they can make. And then I look at it from the point of view how they're using our equipment, which are things like tablets and mobile phones, which we record in video to see how they're using. In 2018, they were spending 1 to 2 minutes looking at our system. Now, we're getting people using it for 3.5 minutes or more, and I can see that they're going through the service, and then they see their resource consumption, and they stay on that page for maybe 3 minutes, talking to their partner, what do we use at home, and then going through to other sections. So without a doubt, people are more engaged, but we've got to deliver the tools so they can apply sustainability.
Thank you very much. Matt, if I may come to you now. So EasyJet Holidays, we're talking about the UK, and we're going to come to India after this. Tell me, if you would, what type of experience you're finding from the consumer perspective. What are they demanding?
Yes, so we conducted research which gave very similar findings to that we've just talked about from Booking.com. And I think one of the interesting things is there was an increase of 35% of customers that had greater demand over sustainable travel post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic. So that opportunity for people to rethink their personal value set, what's important, and I think that sense of togetherness and community, and how does that fit into people's travel aspirations. We're one of the biggest tour operators here in the UK, provide holidays across Europe. So we're well aware that despite having only been formed 3 years ago, that we can't sit around and wait for people to start holding us to account. As one of the biggest players, we have a responsibility to step up and start taking significant action. I don't think anyone's probably particularly surprised by some of the research findings that we've talked about so far. So therefore the question becomes, so what? Right? What is anyone doing about this? We've heard about some of the great things that Booking.com and others have been doing. So one of the things that we've recently launched is our Eco-Certified collection. So when customers are looking to purchase or browse for holiday inspiration, we make it very clear to them which hotels meet GSTC certified standards and which do not. So customers, I think in the research that we conducted, about 2/3 said, travel companies must do more to make it easy for us. So we've risen to that challenge, and as I say, recently launched this Eco-Certified collection. So customers can browse and then make a much more informed purchase decision based on a whole range of factors. Value for money is something that EasyJet and EasyJet Holidays has always been famous for, and we're setting out to show that if you make the smart choices, it's not about great value for money or traveling sustainably, that actually if you present the right information to consumers, they can make smart choices and achieve both.
Thank you. Ravin Singh, Minister of Tourism in India, as I've said, in India, you really are leading the way on this. What is your perception, again, same question, as to how consumers have changed? And this is very much post-pandemic, isn't it? There has been a step change here.
We've heard the speakers from a very advanced tourism in terms of the consumer choices, what we see in the UK or in Europe. But yes, you're right. In India, we saw a late movement towards the sustainability, and the COVID pandemic helped us in that. And broadly speaking, from the national government viewpoint, we see it happening at 3 levels. One is at the level of businesses. And we see that major tour operators, major hotel companies, and major travel, those in the travel trade, are increasingly getting conscious of that and adopting it as a conscious policy. For instance, if I have to name some of the leading hotel groups that you would know, have consciously gone into a place where they're recycling the water, recycling other resources that they're using, and showing it consciously to the traveler that, yes, we are doing it. So we're seeing a movement at the level of businesses, large and small businesses, moving towards sustainability. Then if we talk about states, you mentioned about awards, and there are specific examples of certain states, and I would mention 2 who have done very good work in this, involving the community and increasing the use of sustainable practices. One is Madhya Pradesh, and the other is the state of Kerala, where they have involved the community, involving them in producing sustainable tourism products, such as homestays, and other products that appeal to the consumers. And third, at the level of the national government, this propelled us to come out with a national strategy on sustainable tourism, which we presented. And we are now working on how to set up a criteria of assessing the states, ranking the states in terms of the sustainability, the efforts that the states are putting in terms of policies, so that we push this agenda forward. So the national government is trying to not just have this development in certain pockets, to have this development across the country and roll it out across. And one very important thing that we're doing when I get back from here is the top CEOs of the travel trade will sign a sustainability pledge on the 25th of November in the presence of the United Nations Environment Programme at an event in New Delhi, and that thing will spread the message. So these are the three levels that we are seeing the movement happening in India.
I'm interested to know, when consumers make these demands or are very conscious of things, are they conscious of things that really make an impact, or are they conscious of something which doesn't really make an impact but they notice? I wonder if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think something we need to be careful about, because when you present a sustainable offering to a guest that wants to engage with it, you also want to in some way tap into what they're interested in, but you want to make sure that their choice is also really making an impact. As I said before, I think that travelers have a little bit of a journey to go on when they understand what goes into sustainability, or even, Matt mentioned GSTC certifications. Does the traveler really understand everything it takes for an accommodation to be sustainable and to get that certification? One of the ways that we're trying to tackle this, last year we released our Travel Sustainable program, which is how we recognize properties for their sustainable initiatives that they take, and it recognizes properties that are earlier on in their sustainability journey, doing a few things and having an impact for sure, all the way up to the properties that are certified by GSTC and a number of others as well. But beyond just labeling a property sustainable, it's really important to us that a customer who's interested can actually click and see everything that the property is doing to get that label. What are they doing to have a travel sustainable label? What are they doing to be labeled GSTC certified and actually have that certification? And then in that way, you can start to unpack for a consumer that it's more than single-use products or like towels in their bathroom, but it's LED lighting, it's renewable energy, it's how they engage with the local community, how are they supporting jobs for the local economy. These types of things as well all feed into it, and we have a role to play in educating the consumer on that as well.
So, Chris, my Green Butler, I'm wondering if one had all of this data that you're able to collect, and you presented it to somebody who was staying in a hotel, for example, and you said, look, you've left your lights on more, so therefore you have to pay more. How close are we to that, do you think?
Well, we have that actual service now, and we're actually testing that. And for timeshares and so forth, that's going to have some meaning, because they have to pay their utilities.
Yes.
It's a question whether the industry is ready to take that step. I think there's a hesitancy because, frankly, not everybody quite understands how much they're going to have to pay. And in Scope 3, we have to actually include the end user's consumption. And so travel will have to report the end user's consumption, and until the industry recognizes what that impact is, we're not quite ready there to do it, because they don't know themselves.
Yes. So Ava, there's data and there's data, isn't there? One has to be, you've done an intelligent job of looking at what it is that you're seeing in any of the research that you do.
The data is there, it's a question of breaking it down and analysing it, then they're recognised.
Yeah, Ava, do you find that's a difficult job too? Breaking down data and analysing it and really getting underneath the hood?
I think it's fascinating to look at the data and what stories it can tell us. So when we look at consumers, and Matt already mentioned, that we all had to, well, not had to, but we reevaluate our life values. And so when we look at what moves, what sort of inspires people to make that change in their behavior, we see that predominantly it all depends on whether a person feels that it's their personal responsibility or it's a responsibility of a business or a government to achieve sustainable travel. And now about 2/3 of people, or just slightly less, depending on the country, will expect the businesses to take care of that. And only about 20 to 25% of people will feel that they are the ones who need to take that responsibility. Another thing is really important for businesses, I think, to consider how sustainability offering compares to non-sustainable offering when it comes to decision drivers. And what I mean by that, first and foremost, if we rank various decision drivers on a scale from 1 to 10, we'll always find cost in the top place, followed by value, followed typically by familiarity, or it could be reviews of other customers. So it really depends on what sort of what you're evaluating in that scale. But sustainability, unfortunately, will rank somewhere in 7th or 8th place. So it's almost unfair to expect that the consumer will then forsake, the top 3 drivers in order to get sustainability right. So what we have to do, what travel businesses have to do then, is to figure out how to make sustainable offer better priced or equal value, more familiar, and to also get really, really high ratings from other consumers, because word of mouth recommendations, that will help drive the market size for this sustainable travel.
Ravind, are you finding that there is this debate still in India about whether it's the government's responsibility to introduce regulations, or whether it is the responsibility of the consumer or the business? Or do you think that the consumer demand is such that innovative solutions are so fascinating, which is you've got plenty of them?
No, in India, as I said, I gave the examples of certain 2 states where it has, developed. But, consumer demand needs to be, or awareness needs to be generated in other parts of the country. I won't say that it is uniform throughout the country. And that's where the role of the government, as I said, the state governments, because ultimately they are at the cutting edge and they're the ones who the actual implementers, they actually implement most of the actions related to tourism or the policies related to tourism. So, the role of the state governments, that's why we have come out with the system to assess states and rank them on the basis of the sustainable, the policies that they come out with. So their role will be very crucial in rolling it out and making the consumers more aware. And so to answer your question, I don't think it's uniform that the awareness of the consumers is set in throughout the country, and that is something that we need to work on.
Yeah. Over to you then, Matt, and EasyJet. Are you seeing that individual businesses are taking the initiative sufficiently, or do you think that they could take, I'm talking about the UK now, could take more initiative?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we always talk about, and it makes my toes curl a little bit, is we talk about collaboration. And it's something that we've been talking about, collaboration in the context of sustainability, for what feels like far too long. And what it feels like is we don't need more collaboration, we need more effective collaboration. And I think that's where, yes, the public sector does have a role to play, the private sector does have a role to play, and the third sector does have a role to play. And it's bringing those different voices together to figure out how collectively do we need to work with each other, learn from each other. This stuff is difficult. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it, and we all would have been doing it decades ago. But it is difficult and it's complicated. And it's complicated because we all need to take little steps forward, not constantly be waiting for that silver bullet where we can all say, that was the one thing that was going to change the world. Actually, there's something that all of our organizations can be doing in order to take small steps forward. But I do think that collaborating effectively with the right organizations, and that includes as well hearing from those dissenting voices, or those voices that we don't often hear from. Where's the voice of the small business in the destination? Yes, of course, big hotel chains are critical to our success and to driving our sustainability agenda forward. But people go on holiday to create lasting, loving memories, and it's the destinations that make people's holidays so special. So of course it matters about what the small businesses think, what the small businesses need, and how can we make sure that our customers are aware of those small businesses and their offerings. But as well, what is the role of local, regional, national governments to play in making sure that we can try and level up the playing field as much as possible?
Danielle, it's true, isn't it, that if you went somewhere on holiday, even if the destination, the hotel or whatever it was appeared to have a good sustainability agenda. If the surrounding environment didn't, it would make you feel on edge, wouldn't it? Wouldn't make you feel comfortable if that was a priority for you. So that's important too, exactly what we're hearing from Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even just the destination or the context that you're in, but your whole trip, right? We're talking about, so far we've been talking about accommodations only. But what if you're going somewhere and the transport available to you is not sustainable? What if the options in the destination or the tools that you have related to recycling, that infrastructure isn't set up? So there's more that goes beyond that one specific choice. But we have to tackle it vertical by vertical and then eventually connect that all together to start to make it easier for those travelers to feel that they're making sustainable travel choices across their entire trip. And that means collaborating effectively across the whole travel ecosystem, but that also means within destinations, within states, within all of those ecosystems that actually create a sustainable travel experience.
Chris, it is an important point, isn't it, that destinations can really are very dependent on the infrastructure that surrounds them in order to deliver in this regard.
And we should use that to our advantage to explain to the visitor the impacts that they're making. So here's some examples. Excuse me. Visitors from Canberra to a property that I know will use 1/6 of the water that people from Southeast Asia use at the same property. Those same visitors will arrive at certain times of the year in a t-shirt and flip-flops, while those from Sydney, 3 hours away, will arrive as though they're going to the Arctic. So it's a question of allowing people to adapt to that destination, to understand what the context is of that destination and to live like a local rather than carrying on their consumption, which culturally or geographically seems normal to them. So I think we need to learn to better explain this is how we do things here because this is our finite level of resources, rather than saying we need to standardize all tourism and people can use as much as they want. That isn't a negative because people want to adapt to what is recognized as an appropriate thing to do in that local area.
Do you get calls, Ravin, from local destinations saying, look, we need more regional help, infrastructure help or something in order to deliver? Yeah.
Yes, of course, of course. You know, some destinations are strapped for financial resources, and we are helping the states to build up infrastructure. And you know, in India we have no shortage of numbers as far as tourists. And one result of the 2 years of the pandemic is that we saw is that suddenly people started coming out in very large numbers, especially to the hill destinations. You know, the hill stations and where the carrying capacity is not enough. So we are getting requests that yes, we need to do carrying capacity studies, and then we need to make efforts to ensure that tourism here happens. There is no over tourism, and tourism happens in a sustainable manner.
Ava, we're talking now about some sort of step changes because it feels like we're beyond the don't wash your towels unless you need to moment, aren't we? We are in a bigger moment where people need to make perhaps almost a statement, do you think? A big statement in order to attract consumers. Do you think that's where we are? Sorry, Ava, I was talking to Ava, but anybody wants to. Do you see what I mean? I think we're beyond sort of saying, well, the use of water or the use of electricity or whatever. It almost needs to have an innovative solution there that is very in customers' faces. Chris is pausing there, so maybe he's...
Yeah, I think that we're not good. We seem to be holding back and we're slightly shy of saying these are our limitations. But in fact, the public want to know those limitations and respect those limitations, particularly when they're going to some parts of the world that are very different. And I think we should be using that to our advantage. It doesn't mean they'll have less of an enjoyable holiday. We seem to be constantly linking consumption with happiness. There is no link between the two. Most of the time when people go away, they want to speak to a loved one, they want to spend time with their children, they want to experience new cultures. Consumption actually doesn't feature very highly in that, and we need to sort of back off being nervous about it and say, this is the state of play here, and this is I'm not suggesting rationing necessarily at this stage, but I'm saying that we need to say, these are what we can live, this is the finite resources we have here, but we're going to give you an outstanding experience. For example, I'll take an Australian example of Alice Springs, which is a desert area but cold at night. Rather than whacking the heating up, give everybody a fantastic blanket on the bed. A blanket that's knitted by the Aboriginal community that believe in Dreamtime stories from the stars. And so when you put that rug over your bed, you're sleeping under the stars and you can hear the story. That's the sort of adjustment we need to make, rather than saying, at our hotel globally, the temperature is 21. That's the adjustment we need to make, because those are the confined resources and limitations we have in those places. And people will like that more.
I would love to add to that.
Yes, I can see that you're Ava's also.
No, and I completely agree. I think what we need to do here is also create that positive feedback loop. And right now, with the supply of certified properties that we have in the industry, it's too small to create that loop. We have less than 10,000 properties that have a third-party certification. And what that does is it means that customers are in a position where they have to choose between sustainability and the parameters that they have at the top of their list. And we have to effectively defeat that, because right now we can't win that battle. And so what we need to do is start to recognize more properties for what they're doing, provide that to consumers so that they can see a broader breadth of properties that are taking these actions, rather than those top 10,000 properties, which, by the way, is exactly what we're trying to do with this Travel Sustainable program by recognizing properties across that whole spectrum, because those properties also need that positive affirmation that what they're doing matters. They can't wait until they get that certification to finally get some recognition for it, especially those long-tail partners that are small, earlier stage, maybe don't have the resources like the big chains do. We have to find a way to actually recognize what they're doing and get those customers in front of them for the reasons that they're originally looking for, but sustainability as well. And I think that's how we can actually create that momentum, that flywheel that we want in the industry, and move beyond looking for the customers that are willing to, in their mind, sacrifice something for sustainability, because that is not what needs to happen right now, but that's how customers appear or think it appears right now. And I think that's what we really need to do to move the industry forward.
I think, so we recently done a survey segmentation again, where we looked at what sustainable features matter the most to people when it comes to products and services. And things like recyclable and energy efficient always top the list. So I do think that a lot of travel businesses, especially properties, hotels, they need to consider how to tell consumer that they are very energy efficient. In fact, we recently stayed in a lovely hotel in Barcelona, and what I loved about them is that they didn't really need to do much to tell me all about this. It was so visible everywhere we went. So when you close the door, the blinds will come down. You won't need to cool your room and keep the aircon flowing, whilst you're not in the room. So that conserves energy. There's different ways that they've implemented, where one area doesn't use the electricity, then another one uses, and so on. Lights switch off as you're not walking through the corridor. So it's fantastic. There's so many different ways, and particularly now with the energy crisis that we have, I think a lot of properties will move that direction anyway, because it's so expensive. And so now we're looking at a real need to make the difference and make the change, rather than just being consumer expectation. So that's one. And two, consumers who tend to have more disposable income also tend to care about the environment a little bit more. I'm not saying that people with lower disposable incomes don't care about the environment. That's not the case. But we do see that percentages of people in various different income groups who say just how much they care about the environment, or proportionally, it is greater as the incomes and education levels kind of go up. So again, this is very important for properties to consider this, that what are those expectations of people when they come and they spend money, with you? How can you involve them so that you tell them about the local community? There's a really, really great example in the Caribbean. There's this, a chain of small resorts, and they employ the local communities. They teach them how to grow vegetables, and they buy those vegetables from those local people. They then take their guests who pay thousands and thousands of pounds to stay at their property. They take them to the back of the house. They show them how they process waste, how they have energy kind of efficiency and so on installed within the property. And these people, apparently, they love it. they absolutely love it because they appreciate what the business is trying to do. And then that translates into these customers becoming real brand ambassadors when they go back homes, and then they tell their friends and family and colleagues, what a great experience I've had, and guess what these guys are doing.
Excellent. Ravi, let's come to you. Is there a tension between the desire of people to go on holiday, feel treated and consume, and also to act in a way that is consistent with sustainable goals?
No, I don't think in the long run it's a temporary phase, as I said, post-pandemic when people wanted to get out and they just wanted to do that. So it's probably a temporary phase that I mentioned. But I don't think it is going to work out where increasingly the local communities are getting very conscious. And they know that tourism in their areas can only be sustainable if it is done in a proper manner, in a responsible manner with the tourists. So I think in the long run it will work out, and you'll see, as I mentioned, the steps that are happening at the level of businesses, at the level of destinations, at the level of local governments and the national government. So I think we'll see a movement towards that and more consumer consciousness about that. And one very interesting development that I said is that in many parts of the country, we're seeing lots of local communities getting involved in, getting employment, doing the services, homestays coming up. And that is something that will strengthen the movement towards ecosystem.
So I'm going to ask all of you one short question, and that is, are we moving fast enough? Ravin, let's start with you if we can. Are we moving? India might be moving fast enough. Actually, even outside tourism, it's moving very fast in this field, isn't it?
Yes, I think the pandemic helped us, and now we are moving at the desired pace.
Chris?
I have two answers. The public are way ahead of us. They're moving very fast. We are not moving fast enough in tourism. We have an immense opportunity, and we really need to grab it. It's a fabulous commercial opportunity. We need to go out and embrace it.
Eva?
Well, Alex Sharma has recently said that, our goal to achieve 1.5 Celsius is on life support, and some already say, it's in the mortuary. So just based on that alone, I don't think that we're making enough effort, unfortunately.
Yeah. Matt?
I echo Chris's sentiment entirely. We've been talking about this for too long. The public and our consumers are way ahead of us. It's about time that we all stepped up, started making small, tangible steps forward, and we've frankly got to make sustainable travel mainstream.
And Danielle, you might add to that why it is that businesses are behind, but do you think that we're moving fast enough?
I've seen positive signals in the last few years, but absolutely we have opportunities in front of us that we can seize, and we need to seize them at pace and actually start to do something with them, effectively collaborate, actually move the industry forward together. The methodologies we're talking about today, we can share them, we can continue to move forward together, because there are solutions here. Consumers want it, we have the capability. So yes, now is the time to move at pace.
And is there enough collaboration that goes on, do you think, in the industry?
I have seen some really effective collaborations, some that we've done recently to actually work together on defining a set of methodologies for the industry. I think that needs to continue to expand if we want to do this across the entire sector. And I think that there's a willingness there that I haven't seen before, and so we should seize that opportunity as well. My point being, I think we can do this. I think those opportunities are there. I think we have the right parties, but now is the moment to actually take those steps.
On that note, I will leave it. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll let you leave the stage.